Here we go. Okay, I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the City Council for Thursday, January 3rd, 2019. Ms. Foster, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Boland.
Here.
Councilmember Gragnani.
Here.
Councilmember Mcgowan.
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Here.
Councilmember Manton.
Here.
Councilmember Shea.
Here.
Councilmember Dillard.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino. Councilmember McCutcheon. Councilmember Bope.
Present.
Councilmember Jordan. Here. Councilmember Stein. Councilmember Werther.
Present.
Councilmember Garetano. Councilmember Stevens.
Okay, thank you. For those of you in the audience with us this evening, thanks for being here. If you have a cell phone or other electronic device, if you would please, if it's on, if you'd please turn it to silent, we would appreciate that. And if everyone please would stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. I understand from our clerk that we have no speaker cards this evening, so we will dispense with reading the public participation procedures. Next item is appointments. We have one which is for Ward 7 Planning and Zoning, Mr. Brian Massey. Is there a motion, and as you know this has been before the council previously, is there a motion to approve the appointment? Made by Councilmember Manton. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Mcgowan. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Gragnani.
No.
Councilmember Mcgowan.
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Yes.
Councilmember Manton.
Yes.
Councilmember Shea.
No.
Councilmember Dillard.
No.
Councilmember Dodwell.
No.
Councilmember Taylor.
No.
Councilmember Bertolino. Councilmember Bope.
No.
Councilmember Jordan.
No.
Councilmember Werther.
No.
Councilmember Garetano.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
No.
Okay, thank you. Moving next into the executive session, which is on the agenda. We will need a motion for that and a roll call vote as well. Does someone like to make that motion? Made by Councilmember Dodwell, seconded by Councilmember Taylor. As stated on the agenda, to discuss information relating to personnel records, performance ratings records relating to employees or applicants.
Does this deal with what we're proposing tonight in terms of this budget?
Yes.
Okay, in that case,
Councilmember Werther.
Thank you. Council members, I would recommend that you vote against going into closed session at this time. There's no particular reason any of the items that have been discussed, shared via email, can't be shared with the public and shared here in person. The only desire, I would say, for going into closed session is that some members would like to browbeat other members of the council into submission or scare them with regards to the ordinance that's in front of us this evening. So I will respectfully vote no.
Thank you. Seeing no further, Councilmember Shea.
It's my understanding that you can object to going into closed session and still attend, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Taylor.
So I'm new to this debate regarding whether to go into closed session or not. I made a motion to go into closed session. The reason why I made a motion to go into closed session is because we're going to be voting on this ordinance to hire, and I think we have the ability to go into closed session under revised Missouri Statute 610.021 for hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting employees. So even though it's not necessary, I think I would like to, I'm not on the committee, so I would like to get more information regarding what I'm going to be voting on. So in case there's some things which are more prudent to discuss or legally must be discussed in executive session, I will be voting to go into executive session because I just feel that we're about ready to hire, and it's a personnel issue, and so therefore I will be voting for it.
Thank you, Councilmember Werther.
To Mr. Taylor's point, all the discussions of the committee have been public. There's been nothing that warrants going into closed session for.
For the council's information, this was placed on the agenda at the suggestion and with the agreement of the city attorney. Councilmember Dodwell.
In the past, when we have done hiring, firing, we have gone into closed session, so this is not unlike other instances at all.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Mcgowan?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Manton?
Yes.
Councilmember Shea?
No.
Councilmember Dillard?
No.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Bope?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther? Councilmember Garitano? Councilmember Stevens?
No.
Councilmember Gragnani?
No.
Oh, sorry. Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. So we will go into executive session.
Guess we better take it easy. How are you? Ready to go in there? Yeah.
So we were able to
Yeah, it's a lot going on.
Switch.
Thank you.
It's starting to become just a caricature of the council.
They're not the attorneys.
All right, council members, we are now back in open session. Moving on to legislation, we have one item on the agenda, as you know, for this evening. It's Bill 2430. It's before the council for first reading. It concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Bartoni. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Foster, please read Bill 2430.
Bill 2430, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, providing for the appointment of co-interim city administrators and establishing compensation therefor.
Right. Okay, so one thing I just want to mention as a point of information for the council, I have you. This bill, which has now on the floor it has been read the first time, cannot be amended until after a second reading. So a second reading does not mean passage. It means that's determined by the council with a vote. It just means that it would be subject to amendment. It can't be amended or debated until a second reading. That would take a 2/3 vote. If anyone would want to make a motion for a second reading, I would entertain that now. Made by Councilmember Bartoni, second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the second reading? We'll do it by voice vote to see how it goes and see if we need to do a roll call. All in favor of second reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Ms. Foster, please read Bill 2430.
Bill 2430, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, providing for the appointment of co-interim city administrators and establishing compensation therefor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now it can be debated and or amended if that is either of those are the wishes of the council. Councilmember Werther.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to amend Bill 2430. That motion to include that the, and I'm just trying to find exactly the best place for it, but it may be in a whereas, that, or maybe section 1, quite frankly, because it'd be a simple additional sentence. That additional sentence would state that Mr. Cross, Stephen Cross, would retain the responsibilities of the city treasurer while serving as co-interim city administrator up until a period of time that a new city administrator is hired and begins work.
I would suggest that be in one of the recitals.
Make it a whereas then.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Grignani. So debate and discussion will be only on the proposed amendment, and depending on what happens with that, we'll go back to the main motion as amended or not. So it is the recital that would state, and Councilmember Werther, please correct me if I'm wrong, or the second, that Mr. Cross would serve as co-city administrator per the resolution and also retain his role as city treasurer. Is that
That's the
correct?
intent of the motion.
Well, is that the motion?
That is the motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Taylor.
Yes, thank you for the motion. I understand, and we were discussing in closed session, we can discuss this aspect here, that there's concern with the municipal code that the treasurer cannot be an employee of the city. So I'm concerned with the technical legality of making Mr. Cross both an interim city administrator and treasurer. So I appreciate what you're trying to do in the recital by adding Mr. Cross will retain. My concern is that I still feel that is in conflict with the municipal code. So I would be more comfortable with what we had discussed with the possibility of him being reappointed. Now, I know that some people feel there's a trust issue with that, but I think everyone wants Mr. Cross to serve, have the opportunity to serve as an interim city administrator, and also when a permanent is found, be working as the treasurer again. We don't want to lose that talent. I believe that everyone wants him to be in that capacity, so I would make a motion to amend the motion. I'd like to amend the motion to say that Mr. Cross would be a reappointed city treasurer. That is, I think, much cleaner, because I just don't feel that I can vote for something which it conflicts with the municipal code. So is there a question? Yes.
So just a couple of clarifying questions.
Yeah.
Number one, I'm assuming the premise, given your motion, the premise is that, he would resign, is that correct? And then the intent would be that he be reappointed.
Well, I think that it would just say, it presumes that he would resign
Right.
as per what is required by the municipal code, which would be the legal and right thing to do.
Okay.
But it's up to him. I mean, but if he does, it says that he would be reappointed.
Okay. And then my second.
It's silent on his resignation. It's just saying that he would be reappointed.
Well, I guess my question was, Steve, I don't know how you could be reappointed if you're not out.
True.
Okay.
But I guess I would, if you're going to put that fine of a point on it, I mean, I don't feel that according to the code he can do both. So we either amend the code, or if we're going to make provisions for him to serve, I would say I'd be more comfortable with reappoint than retain. Therefore, I'm making a motion to amend the motion
Okay.
for reappoint.
And
So
then-
that would presume that there would be a resignation.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question for clarification purposes, I believe the city attorney, and he may want to speak to this, would prefer that it state that it be the intent of the ordinance of the council that he be reappointed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Councilmember Taylor?
I don't know. I mean, let's discuss that. Let me ask you this then, since it's to the point. Mr. Mayor, if Mr. Cross does resign and then serves as interim, is it your intention to reappoint him? Would you reappoint him, Mr. Mayor?
So I think that, first of all, we need to get an answer. I don't have a problem answering that, but I think
Yeah.
we need to get an answer to the question relative to the intent first and what the city attorney's logic is before we get to that, because it's just going to color it. So let's handle that first.
Well, the only intent behind it is that the city council with regard to the city treasurer on their charter, consents and confirms the
Right.
mayor's appointment.
Well, why write something that is not legal and not right? So if you're saying that it has to be intent, I will go with that, but then I would reassert my question to the mayor, as it would inform our decision as to whether we want to defeat my motion or not. Is it your intention, would you commit, since we're using the word intent, would you be committed to reappointing Mr. Cross as treasurer after we find a new city administrator?
So I would answer that with, in two respects. First, to answer your question directly as to me, I don't know of any reason today that I would not do that. If he serves in the capacity as the city administrator, I would obviously work with him closer. I would not assume that he would make any malfeasance or anything of an egregious conduct while he is doing that. However, I don't know that he wouldn't, and I'm not going to bind myself to say that I would if he did that.
Okay, so come back on that. Can I ask, barring any wrongdoing or malfeasance by Mr. Cross, would it be your intention to reappoint him? Could you commit to reappoint him if he serves as the man of character we know him to
Absent
be?
any issue of that nature, which I would consider to be a performance, similar to performance-related, I would. That said, my second point is that there is no guarantee that I would be, by the time this comes back to the mayor and the council, there's no guarantee that I, or for that matter, any member of this council, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, would be here. So that's just a practical point, but the answer to your question, you have. So
Yes, thank you. So the way I would summarize the response is that barring death and malfeasance by Mr. Cross, it is your intention to reappoint him.
well, my statement will speak for itself. So, Councilmember Stevens.
Could you restate the original motion? That was from Mr. Werther.
The amendment is what's being debated at the moment. So
The amendment.
The amendment hasn't
from
received
Mr.
a
Worthing.
second.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, thank you. Is there a second? Okay, we have a second to the amendment by Councilmember Manton. I'm sorry? No, that was the first amendment.
That's my question.
We're getting to that, Councilmember Grignani. So if you could please read the second amendment that has, the motion for a second amendment that has been made by Councilmember Taylor and seconded by Councilmember Manton.
Wait a second. Okay. You made.
Please read, let's get it read, please. Go ahead.
To amend the amended motion to state Steve Cross would resign as treasurer and then be reappointed as treasurer.
Right.
Is that correct?
Okay, Councilmember Stevens.
All right. So we've had a lot of arguments and problems with appointments on this council and in this session that we've had. So I'm not sure I'm going to trust that an appointment would guarantee Mr. Cross his position. If he wants to stay as city treasurer and he would like to act in the city administrator role temporarily, the guarantee is to keep him in both. So a lot of the duties and qualifications, they cross over between the treasurer and the city administrator. Is there anything that only the treasurer does that the city administrator doesn't do? I'm looking at the qualifications here. So review city's financial documentation, participate in the selection of brokers and dealers, review and confer with auditors. I mean, all those things are what the city administrator does, correct?
The city attorney who is familiar with the provisions of our code, you want to answer that? And Mr. Cross, you may, if you want to answer.
Yeah, and I think probably Mr. Cross would have a better explanation of it, but generally speaking, the treasurer would have an overall oversight of the city's finances, while the city administrator does the day-to-day on reviewing budgets and expenditures. The city treasurer has the obligation to review the overall financial health of the city.
Can we give Mr. Cross a chance? If you
Please.
Okay, Mr. Cross, do you want to add anything to that? You might want to come to the microphone since we live stream so we can pick that up for everyone who's listening and in the audience.
Good evening. As far, and I was recently asked that very question in terms of what my duties as the treasurer are, and I think it was fairly well summarized just now, but as treasurer, I do a very, very in-depth review of all financial transactions and the proper administration of contracts and so forth. So and that is each and every month. So the package that Dawn and her folks prepare, which is, even though it is a somewhat of a sampling of the transactions that occur each and every day and month for the city, I still review a lot of it, and that is from all journal entries, all bank reconciliations, checks that are written, and that there are appropriate approvals, purchase orders, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, the city administrator obviously has overall responsibility for those kinds of things, but those duties were not performed by the city administrator. He or she would simply not have the time to do that. So my role, and also then to participate in any, Dawn and I are responsible for selecting banks, for selecting investment houses, and to put our money on a nightly, daily basis kind of thing. Budgets, preparing budgets. I also sit on the board for the SID as the treasurer of that 5-person board. So I do a lot of things that the city administrator certainly has overall responsibility to, but doesn't get into the weeds, if you will, like a bean counter like me does. So yes, there is maybe some overlap, but my review as treasurer goes much, much deeper, and I think Mr. McGowan could attest to that again in working with the auditors and so forth. So,
Would you, do you have the time in the week, in the month, to do both the co-interim city administrator duties plus the treasurer duties, if you retain the duties of treasurer?
I will find the time. In fact, I have offered that should I be required to resign temporarily the position as treasurer, I would perform that review of all the financials and do everything I'm doing now gratis, on my own.
And then,
not with any title, not with any compensation, nothing, to do it just so that it is still being done, because Dawn and her folks, as good as Dawn is, and and so forth, and we are lucky as a city to have Dawn and the folks, throughout, this organization, it still always helps to have a second set of eyes, and that's what I do. I'm just looking to make sure things are done properly, that there are signatures, and make recommendations then to the city where we might have weaknesses, to make sure that we've got all the checks and balances. So I have even offered and will offer that I will do that role.
Okay.
If that fits within legalities and so forth, but I would be more than happy to do that. My role, should I be fortunate enough to get it, to act as the co-interim city administrator, I'll be seeing a lot of things even in more depth than I see now, because again, I'm just getting a sampling, but I will, be actually in the weeds as serving in that other role. But I will be more than happy to continue those duties, that are much more in depth, and do it as my role as the co-interim city administrator, so that we don't have a loss of continuity in those kinds of reviews, because like I say, Dawn, I never find any mistake. Well, I shouldn't say that there sometimes, but it always helps to have another person to go through that stuff. So I spend roughly 6 to 7 hours a month just reviewing that financial package. I'll find the time.
Okay, that's great, and I appreciate your willingness to do that. I would like to keep you as both treasurer and co, if you have the time and you can fulfill both duties. And I take it that it's your intention, after the new city administrator is hired, you would like to continue your role as treasurer once your duties as co-interim city administrator are up?
That is my hope and my prayer, that I could go back. I have been fortunate and blessed to serve in that role as city treasurer since 2004. So I'm now starting my 15th year. I'd like to think that I've done a good job and is respected in that role. I'm quite honored to be asked to serve in this other role, but yes, at the end of it, when we finally get done, I certainly would like to go back into that role. So again, if I am asked to resign that position for now, just because it's in the code, I'm happy to do that. I would certainly hope that there would be something put in place that I, could come back to my old role as treasurer. I hope that we can find a way to get that done. But as I said, even in that 4, 5, 6, 8-month process before we find a new city administrator, I will still do that. Just do it.
Okay, well, I appreciate that very much. I'm not going to force you to resign for sure, so I would like to keep you as both.
I mean, because it doesn't matter. I mean, I get a small stipend, to serve as treasurer, and if I'm not treasurer and that I forego that, I'm okay with that.
Councilmember Shea?
Okay, so in an effort to maybe reach a compromise on this, because I'm not really comfortable with leaving the reappointment as a jump ball, and because I don't think that's going to go well. I wonder if we could use language in the amendment that would be something like his service as treasurer would be suspended and his reinstatement, rather than a resignation and a reappointment, we could substitute suspend and reinstate, and then there would be no ambiguity about what is going to happen to his years of service after his co-interim position is done. At this point, I can't support the amendment because of that sort of open-ended, non-secure status that will leave Mr. Cross as political fodder, possibly. And I don't think that's fair to him, and I don't think it's the function of this government to do that, but we've seen it happen, so I'm not gonna go there. I share some concerns. They're very diluted and mild concerns about having him do both, and I don't think it would be appropriate for you to do it without compensation. I appreciate your generosity and your concern for the continuity and to help Don Kaiser, but I think that if you're going to stay in the job, then you need to be officially compensated for it. My concerns are very diluted when it comes to having a conflict with the code stating that he should not be an employee. I don't think the risks are high. I'd be more comfortable with that than leaving him as a resigned treasurer and hope that he gets reappointed. So my plea to the council would be to change the amendment to suspend his service as treasurer and guarantee his reinstatement as treasurer after his service as co-interim is finished.
You're making that as a motion?
Well, I'm putting it out
Or you're speaking, well, we have a motion on the floor, so you're speaking against the motion on the floor, or do you want to make another motion to amend?
I'll make another motion.
Okay. So we have a motion to substitute the language, which would be suspend rather than resignation.
Correct.
Right.
And to reinstate.
And to reinstate.
At the termination of the
Okay.
co-interim.
So that's going to be the new motion on the floor. I'd like to ask for the council's benefit, relative to the code provision about serving as an employee, does that language proposed by Councilmember Shea, does that change anything?
It doesn't change that analysis, no.
Okay, so we have several council members on. I have all of you on the list to speak. You were on the list with the preceding amendment. The amendment that is now on the floor is for suspension and reinstatement. So I'm going to go to Councilmember Bartoni next. I'm going to stay on the list, but I know all of you had your request to speak before this was made. So that means you need to speak to this motion. Councilmember Bartoni.
So, excuse me, I guess I want to start by thanking Mr. Cross and Mr. Vunich for willing to take this task on, and I mean, I very much appreciate it. And the offer to do it gratis, I mean, none of us are concerned about the pay part of it. That's not it. I think, like, my little bit of concern is, and Steve, I trust you 100%, but I kind of look at the treasurer, you're kind of the watchdog. You oversee everything and make sure everything is copacetic with the finances. The city administrator can write a check. So there's there's a little bit of a cross there. No pun intended with the name. There's so the circles overlap a little bit. I think that's just the little bit of concern that Councilmember Taylor was alluding to, and without trying to put words in his mouth. I'm comfortable with the suspension part, because I think everybody up here does want to see you back as the treasurer, as long as as city administrator you're not just writing checks willy-nilly or something like that. But I think I think the little bit of concern is the one job has the ability to do something that the other job, as the watchdog, can, you could just overlook it. I don't think you will, but there is that possibility. It's a zero possibility, but it is a possibility. But I'm comfortable with the suspension and reinstatement, absolutely. And then having, whether it's Reuben Brown or somebody else, fill your treasurer's role in the interim. But yeah, that's just what my concern. And yeah, you can surely respond.
Sure.
Mr. Bartoni, you raise a very good point. And certainly in any organization, having the appropriate checks and balances, you try to do what you can. We have, 22 full-time employees or something here in the city of Wildwood. So in all cases, we don't have that segregation of duties as much as we might like. In the earlier days, Reuben Brown would bring up each and every audit, you've got somebody accepting cash and making a journal entry and so forth. But again, it is what it is in here because of, we keep our staff levels low. In the case of serving as the city administrator, there is nothing that the city administrator can do without another set of eyes or two seeing. So when you said write a check, no. There's no way that Ryan or me or anybody, Dan DeBrill, anybody sitting in that chair could write a check without somebody else looking at it and saying, Okay, there's too many other people looking at it, from Dawn to the person actually writing the check. It just can't happen. We are fortunate with the small number of staff we have here, nobody can do, there isn't any transaction that I can think of that isn't seen by somebody else. Be that as it may. So I wanted to let you know, just for the edification of the council, that nobody can do things in a vacuum. It just doesn't happen. But again, if we don't even want to give the appearance of impropriety, and I'm happy with that, I'm perfectly willing to step aside. Even if you feel like I can't do it on my own time, so to speak, I'm willing to do that. But if we could just find a way to so I could come back and do the job that I've done for 15 years and love to do.
Council members, I've been listening to the debate and debating something in my own mind, and I just want to throw this out for you. As you know, it is my policy to date that I don't say ahead of time what I would or would not do on a bill, because I believe that stifles the debate of the council. In this situation, we are at a point where I agree with the committee that we should have appointments made to run our city on a day-to-day basis. So the conditions are a little unique and exigent, and I don't think it's necessarily fair for all of you to be debating something thinking that I might sign it when in fact I wouldn't, and it would cause even further delay. So I'm going to ask you, and I'll leave it to the council, if you would like to know my thoughts on what I would or wouldn't sign relative to the three options, which would be to serve in both without any suspension. That was the initial motion made by Councilmember Werther. The First Amendment was resignation and reappointment, made by Councilmember Taylor. And then the third, suspension, which was made by Councilmember Shea. I will share that with you. I'm not going to do it unless the council would like me to do that. So, it just could save everyone a lot of time, I think. So, what is the wish of the council in that regard? Councilmember Gregnani? So there are three options that are currently before the council, and with respect to the city administrator, it's the reverse of typical appointments. So the council appoints, the mayor has to consent to that. And as I said, To date, it has been my policy that I don't announce ahead of time whether I would, for example, veto a bill, not sign a bill, what have you, because I think that stifles the debate of the council. So that's why I've been waiting on this, and now we've got three options. And on the other hand, I don't want the council to spend a lot of time and go through and debate all these, and you come up with a decision, and you find out tomorrow that I'm not going to sign it, and we don't have someone appointed, which we need. And so I'm asking the council, if you're interested in knowing my position on it, I'm happy to tell you.
I make a motion that we vote on whether or not we want to hear that. I think that's the only way we're going to resolve that. So I make the motion.
That you want to hear, is that correct?
I'll make a motion that we want.
Well, actually,
yeah, it has to be either affirmative or negative.
So let me, and I appreciate you wanting to make a motion. I don't think you need that, and actually, we have a motion on the floor, which is Councilmember Shea's. So we need to handle, well, it's just a question for the council, and if you want to do it, and I can express it now, I can express it later, or not at all. That's the wish of the council, and I would just like to take, if we can just
I would like to hear anyone else.
Okay, so is there any objection, I guess is the question. Is there any objection? Okay, Councilmember Shea.
I don't have an objection, but I would like to continue the discussion because I have some more questions that are relevant to this appointment. And
Sure.
probably maybe even more relevant than your position.
Do you want to do that now before I do that? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, a couple of questions, and this is going to take us back to, I guess, 2014 or 15. Did Mr. Thomas retain his position as a Public Works Director when he took on the interim position of City Administrator?
I don't know the answer.
Well, I see heads shaking. Who remembers?
Councilor Werther?
Okay, so he did. So he carried on both. Okay.
Yes, he did,
So it's possible.
as well as Miss Lynn Green Bildner also picked up additional responsibilities
Right,
during
so
that
we
time.
had two people. Is it because possibly they were already city employees that they served in both roles? Mr. Young?
Well, I was not here, so I can't confirm or
Okay.
speak to that, but I can tell you that the provision about the qualification is unique to the treasurer.
Gotcha. Okay, that answers that. So he was retained, so his option wasn't offered. Okay, that's what I have. And to your point, though, I no disrespect intended, but I don't really need to know what your position is. I'll find out if you don't sign it, I guess. But I think that we should, maybe I agree with you that you shouldn't taint the discussion. Let's do what's right for the city as a collective body, and then you have that option to do what's right for the city.
Sorry. Is there anyone else besides Councilmember Shea that objects to me indicating my thoughts on what I would say? Councilmember Dillard, you object?
I do. I would rather have the council organically come to its own decision.
Okay. Is there anyone else who objects?
I agree.
Okay, we have 3. You object? 4? 5? 6? Is that a majority? No, we need 7. We need 8, right, tonight? Okay, so it appears that there is anyone else want to go on the negative side?
Are we going to get to the other names on the list, however? Or do you precede all of those?
I'm going to go right to those next.
Thank you.
So given that the council, in my view, by majority approval has expressed an interest in me indicating my thoughts on it, I appreciate the motion made by Councilmember Shea as to suspension. I think that's close. The reason I asked the city attorney relative to rule compliance and was to determine whether it would get us past what I perceive as, I'll say it like it is, it's violating one of our code provisions, and he said it wouldn't. With that in mind, I couldn't support suspension, and as a result, by definition, I couldn't support supporting in both. I could support option 2, which was the Taylor Amendment, which would include resignation and reappointment. Next on the list is Councilmember Mcgowan.
I guess I'm looking at this as a professional bean counter, and also the fact that in my associations with Steve Cross over quite a number of years on city matters, SID matters, and that sort of thing, he's done an absolutely superb job for what we have needed done. He, and I am fully in support of him being appointed to this city administrator spot. At the same time, I do think that it would be better, I know it would be better, for the city if he were not serving in the treasurer position, and that we instead make other arrangements to cover those duties and responsibilities. And the reason for that is that from an internal control perspective, I look at this as a situation where the treasurer in the city of Wildwood is almost serving in a position of being an internal audit function. It's not quite that strong of a position, I guess, but that is effectively what he is doing. And the reason for that is that he's not involved, generally speaking, in making any of the original entries into the bookkeeping system, into the accounting system, financial statements. He may provide advice and that sort of thing to Dawn and help work with the audit firm on various issues, but he's really there more in an oversight type of a function. And for that reason, he needs to have as much independence in order to fulfill that function as possible. And I had a lengthy discussion this morning with Steve directly about his responsibilities, what it is that he does. And I know where he's at on the thing, feeling that he can do both of these things simultaneously. I know he could as well. From a practical standpoint, however, I think what we need to do is follow what professionally would normally be done, and that's to build some separation there if possible. And I think there's a way that we can do that at a minimal cost to the city by utilizing our outside audit firm to provide monthly oversight assistance to us as part of their audit.
So, Councilmember Mcgowan, are you speaking against suspension? The motion on the floor is, the amendment on the floor currently is the suspension approach, which is not resignation, but suspension and reinstatement, I believe. So are you speaking for or against that?
Against.
City Attorney's asked if Councilmember Shea got a second.
I thought Mr. Bartoni was it?
I don't think it was asked for, but...
Yeah, is there a second to Councilmember? My apology.
I'll second.
Councilmember Dillard seconds it. Okay, so back to Councilmember. Thank you, John. Back to you, Councilmember Mcgowan. Are you speaking for or against that amendment of suspension and reinstatement?
I'm speaking against it because I think we need a cleaner break point, if you will, between him serving as treasurer versus serving in the capacity of city administrator.
Okay, thank you. Already have you, Kevin. Councilmember Gregnani, you're next on the list, and this is to, but you were on the list before this amendment was made, so this is to the suspension and reinstatement amendment.
Oh, I'm addressing all these issues. I have a question and then a comment. Can I get you to come up here for a minute, Steve? You know, I know people talk to you independently, but here in front of this group tonight, I want your candid opinion. Can you or can you not do both of these jobs?
Well, in terms of the actual manpower and the ability and so forth, yes, I can. But Mr. McGowan is absolutely correct. The more that we can show a separation of duties and so forth, that's a good thing. And I am perfectly willing to step aside and call it what you want. I'll step aside and we can have Reuben Brown. In fact, I made that suggestion to Mr. McGowan this morning and said we can have Reuben Brown come in and do a mini audit, if you will, just to make sure that everything is on the up and up, similar to what I do. So yes, I could do it, but for the good of the city and without having to engage you all in this, I'm perfectly willing to step aside. The only thing that I am hopeful for and as asking for is at the end of my engagement as the co-interim city administrator that I can come back to my role as treasurer. That's the only thing. If we could all agree on that, I think we're done, and I'll step aside, okay? And then I'll do this role, and I will do it to the best of my ability and so forth. But if that's not, I don't want to use the word guarantee, but if we can't come to that, that puts me in a bad position. It puts me in a position that none of you would agree to. If you had to step aside from your role as a council person and then come back 6 months later and you may or may not get to go sit in your seat again, I think every one of you would say, I don't want that gig. That's my belief. Okay, so if there is a way that you all can somehow get that done without violating any civil code, and believe me, I'm not advocating that we do anything like that, but I just have to believe there's some form or some way that we could just not leave me where I might or I might not get appointed.
Right.
But, so I'm sorry for the long answer, but, you know, I've been told I'm
No,
not a man of few words. So
No,
anyway,
that-
I can do the job. I will step away from the treasurer and help in any way I can the auditors to do their function, and then I would like to be able to step back into that role.
No, it's perfectly acceptable, and I guess if you feel more comfortable having somebody kind of look over your shoulder anyway to make sure that there's no, you would be covered in a sense with doing what Larry is suggesting, so that there would be no question that you're on the up and up. I don't have any problem with the fact that you would be, but for your protection, as well as for the city's protection, it might be better to do it that way.
Right.
And I agree with you that we need to guarantee some mechanism whereupon you would be put back into your position as treasurer upon your termination as co-city administrator. This proposition that Ms. Shea has brought forward, the language makes some sense. The mayor has already said he doesn't like it, he's not going to sign it. So I think we know that that's not going anywhere. Mr. Taylor's amendment says that you'd have to resign and then you would be reappointed. I got the distinct impression that there's no guarantees from you guys that would happen. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Okay, you're wanting my answer?
I want an answer from somebody over there that would tell me whether or not the First Amendment, which was made by Mr. Taylor, in which Mr. Cross resigns and then is appointed, is a reasonable guarantee that can be written into this agreement so that this happens down the road when Steve is no longer the co-administrator.
So that's for the city attorney?
I guess.
Well, ultimately, whatever guarantees you make in this ordinance is ultimately going to be up to you and the mayor in terms of the reappointment.
It's going to be up to whom?
Up to you and the city council and the mayor as to the reappointment.
Yeah, I don't have any. The only other thing I have to say is that what I tried to explain to you all before. When the committee met, there's no hidden agendas here. In case anybody's worried that there's a hidden agenda here, there is none. You know, Mr. Vunich and Mr. Cross are two very fine people who served diligently to this city for years. We're asking them to take on an extra workload to carry us through a tough time until we can get a city administrator in place that can do this job. I don't know why this is so complicated. I don't understand why this has to be so contentious. There's no reason for it. Absolutely none. All I want out of this, and the same thing that Mr. Cross wants, is the guarantee that he can go back to being what he was before we took him out of this position. And you know what? He didn't ask us to do it. We asked him. So he's doing us a favor.
Council,
So, I mean, just keep that in mind, will you? I've had enough.
Councilmember Dodwell. And this is, I'm just going to emphasize again, this is on the amendment that we have on the floor. We're going to be here all night if we don't focus on what's on the table. So it's the amendment of suspension, in favor or against suspension and reinstatement.
This is beyond somewhat frustrating at this point because we're debating what I think are fairly simple terms. We had this discussion in the committee meeting of having Mr. Cross step aside from his treasurer position and move into the position of co-city administrator. we had some additional discussion and we came back to council with a slightly different take on it. But I think if we can approve the reappointment, then we have happy temporary city employees. We have a treasurer that we need. And while there may be a slight risk that the city takes for reappointment, then I'm willing to take that slight risk at this point so that we can move forward with the more pressing matter, which is finding a new city administrator.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yeah, I wasn't that had a benefit in the last committee discussion because of family commitment. But, Mr. Cross, can I ask you a question? So if you have to pick one position, which one would you pick?
I'm not sure that's a fair question.
It's not.
I'm being asked to make a decision on whether you should be suspended.
Ladies and gentlemen, Councilmember McCutcheon has the floor, and she's entitled to ask whatever question she would like. Mr. Cross, please proceed.
I'm being asked to make a decision here. One of them is suspension, one of them is no, one of them is do both jobs at the same time. So I would like to know which is your preference. If you have to pick one, would you rather continue to be treasurer, or do you want to be co-interim administrator?
I don't believe it's an either or.
So
okay, I think that an amendment to whatever's on the floor now, if the amendment that says a suspension and reinstatement, if those words are not palatable to council, again, all I think that we're all looking for, I think, is that I would step aside as treasurer, and I've agreed to do that. And then at the end of my responsibilities of performing as co-interim city administrator, that there is some process or language in place that allows me to go back as treasurer. And so the amendments that are on the floor right now don't really, it seems like, address that, because the word suspension doesn't work and so forth. So if someone could find different words that says Mr. Cross will step aside and will not, and then we will have outside auditors review the work, and then at the end of that period of time that Mr. Vunich and Mr. Cross serve, then Mr. Cross then will resume his duties as treasurer. So that, it seems to me that words to that effect satisfy everybody. I step aside, it's in the best interest of the city, we don't have any it doesn't look like I'm in a conflict of interest situation, but I'm also protected that I get to have my old job back. So I think to ask me if I would choose one over the other basically says it's a fait accompli, that it isn't going to happen. I either have to be this or that, and I don't think that's fair, and I think that is extremely dismaying to me. And I will say this, that when I was asked to serve this, I mean, I couldn't have been happier and more honored to be asked, even considered to be the co-interim city administrator. This is starting to lose its luster.
So basically, you didn't answer my question.
Yes, you're right, I did not.
Yeah.
Am I required to answer your question?
Well, I would certainly hope so, and purpose of full disclosure, I'd certainly hope you would answer my question.
Councilor Shea, please.
So you're
that's
looking
your
for an
choice.
answer. If I have my choice, I have to pick one or the other.
That was my question.
Okay.
You can either answer it or not answer it. That's up to you. But I just like Mr. McGowan and Mr. Taylor stated, number one, we have a code that says we can't
I'm not
do that.
asking you to violate the code. I'm saying I'm saying I agree with every one of you that says I will step aside. Does everybody understand that I have said that? Is there any question that I've said I will step aside? Let's make sure that you understand what I'm saying. I am
trying to understand. I've asked you to pick. If you have to pick one, which is a job that you would more importantly like to serve as? That's my question. You can answer it or not. But that's a question I feel like the residents of the city should know the answer to.
So I think he's, ladies and gentlemen, please, so I think you've indicated you don't want to answer.
No, I don't want to say that because it sounds like I'm being ornery and so forth, and I don't want to be that way. I just think it's an unfair question.
Okay.
If I have to pick, if you're going to force me to pick, I will serve as co-interim city administrator because I have that much respect for Mr. Vunich that I don't think it's fair to dump all that onto him and so forth. So I will serve in that, and then I will just hope that you guys will do the right thing at the end of this, and that I get to serve. And if not, well, then so be it. And I will just say, well, you know what? I served 15 years and then got kicked to the curb, and I won't like it. But if I have to pick, I will choose the co-interim city administrator and walk away from the treasurer's position. If that's what you're asking me to do, I will do that.
That's not what I'm asking you to do.
No, that's exactly what you asked me to do.
Okay.
It's up to the council. It's not up to one person.
Okay, but you asked me which one would I pick, what I feel is in the best interest of the city, and I think serving now in the role as co-interim is probably more important to do, and I will do that because I've been asked to do it, and I don't want to walk away from that because I think that is I think the city is more at risk by not having someone perform that than they are as the treasurer, because we have a solution that would take care of that from outside counsel. But if the back end doesn't work, well, I'll deal with that 6 months down the road or whatever it is. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so let me paraphrase. You would you would go ahead and do city administrator if you had to do one or the other.
Correct.
But you want some sort of guarantee that after your service, you would get the treasurer's job back.
That would be my hope, yes. That would be what I believe that from what I've heard, and so forth, that the majority of council would like that to happen. But if for whatever reason, legally or otherwise, it can't, I'll deal with it in 6 months. And then if I'm not treasurer anymore, well, then I'm not treasurer anymore. Because I think that's probably more important, and it's better in the best interest of the city, and to use your words, the citizens, to serve as that role to help Joe. And Joe and I will handle that position for whatever it takes until you find a full-time.
Thank you for answering the question. I know that was difficult. You would choose not to answer that question, but I do. I think it's important for the residents to know that. And
Okay.
I certainly appreciate you answering. Thank
So
you.
again, I will serve as the co-interim city administrator.
Councilmember Werther.
Thank you. Mr. Cross, you can take a seat. Sorry you're having to go through this sort of harassment here. And that's all it could be, harassment, quite frankly. When most council members have no clue, obviously, what a city treasurer does, let alone what a city administrator does. And I find it just appalls me to no end, the line of questioning, the assumptions that are made, when people need to understand their basic job first. Now, to the question regarding the amendment, I think there is language that will satisfy this to Mr. Cross and for most members of council. Language will read it such as that Mr. Steve Cross will temporarily resign his position as city treasurer, and that the city treasurer position will remain vacant while Mr. Cross serves as co-interim city administrator. That Mr. Cross will return to his position as city administrator when a new city administrator is appointed and begins active employment with the city of Wildwood. And that Reuben Brown shall perform reviews necessary during this period to ensure the solvency of the city of Wildwood.
Okay, so you're speaking against the amendment to suspend.
I've just made a new amendment. Thank you.
Okay, so do you have that, Madam Clerk? I'm sorry? Can you repeat it, Tim?
Absolutely, not a problem. That Stephen Cross will temporarily resign from his position as city treasurer, and that the city treasurer position will remain vacant while Mr. Cross serves as co-interim city administrator. That Mr. Cross will return to his position as city treasurer when a new city administrator is appointed and begins active employment with the city of Wildwood, and that Reuben Brown shall perform periodic reviews to ensure the solvency of the city of Wildwood.
Okay, thank you. Now, do you have it? So, and I know this was mentioned earlier, this was substantially similar to one aspect of Councilmember Taylor's motion, and we had the issue of intent. City attorney, is it okay if it doesn't include relative to return to the position, it is the intent that he do that, and just state it affirmatively? Can you please speak to that?
if you want to put it in a whereas clause or recital, it is just simply the declared intent.
Okay. Are you comfortable, Councilor Worther, that it be in the recital?
I would prefer it be a part of the sections of the actual ordinance, because that way it will carry weight.
The only concern I have is that the issue is that, as I mentioned to you previously, is the inconsistency with the charter provisions regarding appointments.
I understand that, but unfortunately, I think the city is in a unique situation at this particular juncture, and as a result, needs to have this addressed and addressed properly. Otherwise, I don't expect Mr. Cross to put up with this BS much longer, quite frankly. So I'm looking for a second on the amendment.
I'll second the amendment. He's got an amendment to that.
Okay, so we have a second to, you can do any number. All right, so it's seconded. Councilmember Mcgowan?
I just want to ask Tim if he would agree to somehow modify or strike out the very last few words saying that they were asking Reuben Brown to ensure the solvency. There ain't no way they're going to do that.
I'll be happy to strike the ensure the solvency part. I'll be happy to delete the ensure the solvency aspect and simply say Reuben Brown shall perform periodic reviews during this period.
And if I may, with
I
the...
agree to that.
Okay, and with the indulgence of the council, if you'll just bear with me a second, since we're trying to get through this and essentially doing committee work. Councilmember Worther, I would be prepared to sign the bill if it is in the whereas clause. I would not be prepared to sign it if it's in the actual sections, for the reason if I can finish, please.
Sure,
for the
feel
reason
free, then I
the
want to
city
respond.
attorney mentioned.
Thank you. Here's the point for the residents, those watching at home and others. It's the language. It's the ability that somebody doesn't want to take their finger off a button. That's the issue we have here, quite frankly.
Councilmember Worther, as we have discussed, I think we're now in our 10th time, Robert's Rule specifically prohibits impugning the motives of the council. Please speak otherwise as...
I didn't name anybody. I didn't name council. I didn't name Mr. Young. I didn't name you. So,
don't have to name
I'm making an observation. Very simple in this regard. The fact of the matter is, some would prefer the city to continue to flounder. Some would prefer to have the ability to ultimately have a chip that they can later control. That's not fair to Mr. Cross. It's not fair to you as residents. It's not fair to this council. Mr. Cross serves with a great deal of distinction in this city. From where we've been to where we are today, it's been leaps and bounds. Mr. McGowan knows that. This is ridiculous. This needs to be part of the sections of this particular ordinance, not as part of the whereases, because obviously, if it's part of the whereases, well, maybe it doesn't really matter all that much. Maybe we can avoid it. No, it needs to be down in writing, so this is done and done right.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yes, hey, thank you. I guess we're on the, speaking on the new amendment?
Yes, we are.
Amendment to the
Councilmember
amendment
Worther's
to the
amendment.
amendment? To the amendment? Okay. Well, I guess if it goes into whereas, you sign it, correct?
Correct.
And if it doesn't, you don't. So it comes down to an issue of whether or not we're going to have an element of trust regarding this. I would like to say that my concern with this whole thing is not on the integrity of Mr. Cross, and it's definitely not that at all. If it was just on that, I'd say do both jobs. But I do have the concern that we do things by the letter of the code because, you know, we send out code enforcement. And if that fence is 6 feet and 2 inches high, Mr. Vunich, and if there's no permit, what do? Say, hey, it's a nice fence. That's a good fence. No, there's consequences, right? So if we're going to have our residents follow municipal code, we must follow municipal code as well. So I'm sorry to ask to do this, but I'd like you to come up, Mr. Cross. I want to ask you a question. I do. I want to ask Mr. Cross a question. Yes. And I want to say thank you for your service, man. I mean, this is my read on it. I want to say, I think that if, who knows, if we're going to suspend, we're going to do this or that. I can say this. It is my belief that if you do resign, serve, you will be reappointed. That's my belief. Now, I know some people may have questioned that. I inquired of the mayor, and he said, barring malfeasance, his death or whatever.
Yeah, death was what.
Death, malfeasance, he would renominate you.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you, and if you're uncomfortable in answering it, say, hey, I wish to remain obscure, but do you trust the mayor's statement that barring malfeasance or death, that he intends to renominate you for the position after you're done serving? Do you feel comfortable with that?
Yes.
You feel comfortable with
I
that?
don't believe that the mayor would intentionally not tell the truth. So he
See,
and I
that's
have a-
where
he
you and I
have-
can hold hands and walk towards the sun a little bit. I think if he says that in front of the media, he says that in front of the council, and he says it to you, and you say, Mr. Mayor, I'm taking you at your
taking
word
his
on
word.
this,
He
I
took
think it would
his-
be political suicide, a boneheaded thing, pure mean thing to do. Now, some people believe he's capable of that. Well, I'm saying, I believe, I really believe that if we put into the whereas section that we're going to renominate and appoint you,
And
there's the political will to do it.
Right.
And it's going to happen. I will support whatever the mayor supports, and anything that I've done here has nothing to do with you. I think all these languages are about the same. I just want to get something done. The only other option is to change the code. And to change the code, it's going to be a process, right? We're going to have to refile it. So
No, the code is, I mean, you guys
Right.
are bringing
So-
it up.
so-
Mr. Booth, so again, I'm not
right.
asking the code
So
to
you feel
change.
comfortable with the mayor's?
I believe in my heart that we have to follow code. And if
Yeah,
it goes
I-
against, we all have a moral, ethical responsibility to uphold the code, the chart, the plan, everything related to the city of Wildwood. And I am no exception. I am not special.
Nor am
I
I.
don't get any special treatment.
Right.
And I take the mayor at his word.
And that's why
He and
we
I had
like
a
you
good
as
conversation
treasurer.
Yesterday, and I think we both have mutual respect for each other and so forth. So, yeah, if I die, I'm not going to be expected to be appointed
And
again.
if
That's
you
okay.
and if you rip off the city or run a bulldozer through something, well, we might have to think
You
about it.
might have to
Right,
think
right.
about it, so.
But if his word's good enough for you, I don't know why we're debating. Fine with it. If we do reappoint the mayor, treasurer, I think I don't know the legalities. Of council people, or like, I really like that guy, I'm going to bend the rules a little bit. Or that's a damn nice fence, it can be 6 feet 3 inches without a permit, or whatever. We just can't do that.
Right, I agree.
Because, we fine people and things when they violate the code. And I believe he will renominate you, because he's made that commitment to you. You've said you've trusted him. We've grilled him on it. I think the political will is here. And I think what we have is a city, is our laws, our culture, and I think we need to start just a bit trusting people. Now, I might not trust them with my cat or my dog, but I can trust them with renominating you, right? I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if you like cats or dogs or whatever, but what I'm saying is there's a level of comity that we have to get to.
And I am willing
believe
to
that he
meet
will
him
do it.
halfway, and I will trust and hope that he will do the right thing.
And I'll tell you what, if he
and
doesn't
counsel-
do it, I think that's the last thing he'll do.
Councilmember Manton, I know you've been waiting.
May I make one other statement before
Sure.
we move on? I just want to address Councilman McCutcheon that I hope I didn't sound disrespectful to you. It wasn't, because, I kept telling myself, don't act like Judge Kavanaugh and get all indignant, like he was during the hearings and so forth. So if I came across a little strong, I apologize to you. This is important to me. and having some level of assurance or trust or whatever. I think you know how passionate I am about the city and my roles that I serve in the city, and so it was a question that I wasn't quite expecting to have to, I was hoping we were coming to a mutual agreement, so that kind of caught me by surprise a bit, that I would have to choose one over the other. But, so, I apologize if I sounded disrespectful.
Councilmember Manton?
We've had a lot of different discussions about 4 different amendments tonight. And I think what I've heard Mr. Cross say, I think what I've heard Mr. Councilmember Taylor say is that option 2 is acceptable to him. So that's out of all these options, it comes back to this. He's willing to step aside. He's taken the mayor's words that he'll be reappointed. Let's be done with it. Option number 2 is what he said he would agree to. And all this other conversation around this, God forbid people listen to live stream, probably don't know who's on first, is a side issue. He's agreed to the terms of the amendment of option number 2 that Councilmember Taylor made and I seconded. Let's get on with it. And thank you for putting up with us this evening.
Councilmember Dillard.
Thank you.
First of all, Mr. Cross, I'm sorry you've had to be subjected to this. I think that was an unfair question to ask you in either or, and I wish you hadn't been put in that position. I appreciate your answer. Second of all, for a primer of those on live stream, I think the reason we're having this debate is because we all realize that there is a lack of trust. We're trying to protect you. We want you to stay in that position before and after you serve as interim city administrator. Again, there's a lack of trust. Wildwood 19 in the year 2019 is where contracts are interpreted strictly and handshakes mean nothing. That's why we're having this discussion. I like suspension. I like Councilman Werther's plan, because it does exactly that. It forces, or at least ensures you to have that position as city treasurer after a permanent city administrator is named. Now, I know I'm not clear as to why suspension wouldn't work. I know that the best argument against it would be that, in the city handbook and in typical employment practice, you use suspension as a discipline of employees. We all also know that these are exigent circumstances. Like the mayor said, I don't think anybody watching the record of this or in this room, you would understand that if we suspended you, we're doing it out of discipline. We're doing it because it's a procedural function to get what we want and to get what you want. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable solution to this problem, and that's why I support it.
Councilor Shea.
Okay, just wanted, I'm really sorry that some people on this council don't have the temperament or the patience for a full-bodied discussion and like to characterize it as a bunch of nonsense. I don't believe that's the case. I think for the most part this has been very enlightening, and what I've learned is first I want to say that the committee's original intention was to have you resign your spot, and our intention was to have it written into the ordinance that you would be reinstated, okay, reappointed. We were really working together. That was the original intention, okay? And throughout the last few days, it was contorted into, well, we've got this legal hurdle, this obstacle. Nobody from the committee ever suggested at the committee meeting that you should serve both you should serve both at the same time. We understood that to be a potential conflict, but that's why we agreed. We talked about it, but we agreed that we would have you resign that, okay? With the full confidence that you would be reappointed. I would like to, what I've learned here tonight is that we've heard the mayor render his opinion, something which he says he doesn't do, with the consent of council, and basically say, kill the motion before it was even voted on. Because if we vote on something and he tells you he's not going to sign it, guess what? We've stalled this whole thing, okay? And the whole point of having this meeting was, first, to provide continuity of service to the residents, to get these appointments done. Second, to restore communication from that office to the community at large and to the staff and to the council. Third was to mitigate any negative effects on remaining staff who are going to who are making do while we don't have a city administrator. Those were the 3 priorities for meeting tonight, because we wanted to get this done quickly. On that, we have failed. The chair actually insisted one item on this agenda. Let's get this done. I think in the earlier email, she actually had it itemized down to the minutes that we were going to spend on this. It was a great effort, Katie, but clearly that was derailed by what I would call distorted interpretations of what we plan to do. I did not hear a guarantee from the mayor. I don't know who still believes in Santa up here, but I did not hear a guarantee that you were going to get appointed. If the mayor would like to clarify, and I wish that he would, say it one more time for the record, I would think it would be necessary, because I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And I'm glad that you have the faith that you do in that, but I don't share it. Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon, for asking the most awkward and inappropriate question, because what you did is all of us a favor. You revealed what the outcome's going to be.
Councilmember Werther.
Wait, I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The question of, I need clarification on why you don't support having it as part of the ordinance, because there's a nugget there. There's a nugget of reveal and information. If it's your intention to reappoint you, well, that makes it pretty simple and easy. And if it's your intention to reappoint him, why not just have it part of the ordinance, and it removes all doubt?
Okay. So, you're directing that to me, Councilmember Shea? Yes or no, you're directing it to me?
I'm not finished with my comments.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. We don't have to look to too distant history to find out how manipulative these appointments have become under our mayor's guidance. And it makes no sense to sit here with a straight face and say that this can be trusted. And I'm disappointed to have to say that, but those of us who have dealt with it privately, dealt with it publicly, have been the target of discriminating behavior, there would be no way I would trust that. But I invite the mayor to restate it, or further, I invite you to change your position and support the reinstatement, or whatever the language. Basically, Tim, what you've done is just put a lengthier description of suspended. You know, I thought it was a concise word, but you've elaborated on it and made some people feel more comfortable with it. I see no ambiguity in suspension. It doesn't mean you're going to be poking around the corner going, how can I get back to my treasurer job? There's no lack of distinction between your duties as co-interim administrator and a suspended treasurer position. I don't think there's any risk of him doing the job behind the curtain, Larry. So I'm not sure exactly what your problem with the word suspension was, but I would invite the mayor to fully support this last amendment, which puts it guaranteed in the body of the ordinance. And if you're so convinced that he will reappoint you, then you should have no problem doing that.
What is the actual motion currently on the floor?
The motion on the floor is Councilmember Werther's motion. Would you like it read again?
Yes, I'd like to have it stated, please.
To include in the sections of the bill that Stephen Cross will temporarily resign as treasurer, and the treasurer position will remain vacant while Stephen Cross is serving as co-interim city administrator, and Stephen Cross will return as city treasurer when a city administrator is hired and begins employment with the city, and Reuben Brown shall perform periodic reviews.
May I ask the maker of the motion, is that your correct motion?
Essentially, it is. There's a few small words here, but those are inconsequential.
And you're not offering any amendment to that motion?
No, it needs to be.
Then I call the question.
Okay, so the question has been called. It is non-debatable. Is there a second to the motion to call the question? Councilmember Shea, are you seconding the motion? Okay. And we'll do that as a majority vote, is that correct? And it is a majority vote. All in favor, we'll do by hand, or I'm sorry, we'll do by voice vote, and we'll see if we need a roll call. All in favor of calling the question, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion to call the question stands, so now the vote is on the amendment as proposed by Councilmember Werther. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Manton?
No.
Councilmember Shea?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
No.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
No.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember Bope?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Garitano?
No.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Gragnani?
Yes.
Councilmember McGowan?
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passes, and just bear with me, I want to get my parliamentary stuff right. So, do we need to go back and do it the other amendments, or is it just, or does it have a second?
Just to call the question.
I'm sorry. That was a vote to call the question? Or no, it was a vote on the motion.
No, that was a vote on the amendment.
Motion. Sorry. All right, so the motions to proceeding, it kind of takes care of this, right? Or do we need to go back and handle each one of those? Okay, so technically, we need to go back through the motions. We're going to do it in reverse order as we have to. So the motion prior to that was Councilmember Shea's, which was suspension and ratification. Any further discussion on that motion? And then we'll get back to the main motion. Just bear with me. We've got to do it this way. Seeing none, all in favor, we'll do it by voice vote.
Weren't these amendments to the amendments?
Yeah, we've got every amendment that was made. We have to go back to each one until we get back to the main motion.
Point of order.
Yes.
Doesn't, I would think the last amendment, it was
Took
my
care of that.
understanding that the last amendment would subsume all the previous amendments?
Correct.
That was my question as well. The city attorney advised otherwise.
So we're
Why
changing,
don't you state, John, so they know what you're saying?
These were all propositioned as amendments to the amendments, so you
Okay.
need to go back and actually address each one.
this is a change in procedure from what we've done in the past now. Very
Maybe,
clear,
but I
very
think-
clearly so.
Maybe, but I think if it's by Robert's rules, that's what we should have been doing all along. With the consent, with the consent of the council, you can withdraw. If the unanimous consent of the council, you can withdraw your motion.
I move to withdraw my motion.
Well, you can just ask, is there any objection to Councilmember Shea withdrawing her motion? Okay, no objection. Now we're back to Councilmember Taylor's first amendment, which was to, I'm sorry, first
Yeah,
amendment.
I have a
which-
parliamentary inquiry regarding that. So, Mr. Attorney, if that were to pass, what does that do with what's the status of what we approved earlier? I don't understand. Can you give me guidance on that?
Each motion was made to amend the original motion.
Okay.
So, because it's an amendment of the main motion that was made, which was the first motion to amend, you have to go backwards and get down to what the original motion was.
His question was, what if it passes?
So I think his question was, if it passes, does that
Tack on
is
to
it
what we-
mutually exclusive with the motion that Councilmember Werther proposed that the council passed, which I believe it would be mutually exclusive. But,
Essentially, yes.
okay. So now we're back to.
Say it again.
It would be. I'm sorry. So now we're back to the first amendment that was made, which is by Councilmember Taylor, Councilmember Shea, and I'm going to get to that. I'm going to back into it. Okay. So we have an amendment that we have to handle, which was made by Councilmember Taylor, which specifically said, I believe, that he would resign and be reappointed, and that would be in the whereas. There would be something in the whereas that would
It would sign
exactly.
that, yeah.
So that's the motion on the floor at this point, and it would be now to Councilor Shea. I think this answers your question. If not, let me know. That motion, that being Councilmember Taylor's motion, is mutually exclusive with Councilmember Werther's motion that the council approved earlier, meaning they both cannot exist. So if this gets approved, then that's going to wipe out the decision, the vote of the council that was just made. Okay? All right.
So, point of order?
Yes.
Could I make a clarification as to what the motion is, or?
You can, and
So this is, so I have a question, though. Well,
let's take these one at a time. So read his motion.
To include a whereas clause to amend the amendment to the motion to state Stephen Cross would resign as city treasurer and then be reappointed as city treasurer.
You know, I'm going to stand corrected. The city attorney advises they would not be mutually exclusive.
Right, let me make a clarification. Both could exist independently and still be in the ordinance, because we've got one in the recital that's a declaration of intent, we've got another that's in the provision, and they're not inconsistent.
Exactly.
So
That's
both
right.
can exist.
Both can exist. My apology.
but if you refuse to sign, can you sign one and not the other? Do you have line item? So,
No. All of them.
If the motion for your amendment passes, both items will be in the bill. If the motion for your item fails, it fails with that language and only with Councilmember Werther's language.
right, and Werther's language is going in the whereas or in the
Section.
Section. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Shea, do you have a question?
They have their hands up first, so
All right, Councilmember Werther.
I would ask that Councilmember Taylor consider withdrawing his motion so that we can clean up the mess that we've created this evening and get back to the nub and move on with this. So I would implore him to go ahead and do that.
I don't know how, in response, I don't know how it cleans it up. It just,
just like I did.
well, but one's in whereas and one's in the,
So Councilmember Taylor, do you want to remove it or not?
no, I would like to take a
Okay.
vote.
All right. So we've had it read. We'll now take a vote on Councilmember Taylor's First Amendment. Councilmember Stevens, what's the question? You have a question? Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Manton? Councilmember Shea?
No.
Councilmember Dillard? No. Councilmember Dodwell?
No.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Bope?
So this is John, this is a Steve Taylor, Councilmember Taylor's amendment, which is to state in the recitals that that's going to be a warning. We need to calm down in the audience so we can do our business at the council, and I'm going to ask you nicely the first time. John, the question is, on the floor, is whether to include Councilmember Taylor's amendment, which would state in the recitals of the bill that Mr. Cross would resign and be appointed. Yes. Okay.
Councilmember Jordan? No. Councilmember Werther?
Nay.
Councilmember Garitano?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
No.
Councilmember Gragnani?
No.
Councilmember McGowan? Yes. Councilmember Bartoni?
No.
I'd like to change my vote.
I'm sorry. If there's no objection by any member of the council, we'll allow Councilmember Bope to change his vote. Go ahead, John. Okay, well, I think your vote stays the same. I think your vote would stay the same with that, if that's your intent. Fails. Okay, now we're back to the main motion as amended, which is that the bill presented to the council, Bill 2430, as amended, be approved. Any further discussion? Councilmember Bartoni.
I could be mistaken because we've had this. I think Tim made the original amendment. I think Steve's the second.
I think you're right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Is that your recollection?
I'll make it easy. I'll withdraw my amendment to yours.
Is there any objection by any member of the council, since it's in the possession of the council, to Councilmember Werther's withdrawal of his motion? Seeing none? All right. Now we're back to the main motion. Thank you, Councilmember Bartoni. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion? Councilmember Taylor.
So, given, I'm just want to know, what is the status of your inclination of signing this, given the well, I was just trying to remember what your position on that was before I make my vote. That's all.
I stated earlier that I would sign it if it was in the recital. I would not sign it if it was in the body of the bill.
And it is in the body of the bill.
That is correct. Councilmember Werther.
Yes. Mr. Young, a couple questions regarding recitals in bills and ordinances. Are they essentially setting the scene for what's to come in terms of the sections that follow in the
They're
ordinance?
declarations of intent, correct.
Declarations of intent. Do they carry any legal precedent?
In terms of enforceability, no.
That's, now, Mr. Taylor, you understand why I wanted it in the section, because there is no legal enforceability in a whereas. And that's probably the reason why some have indicated their desire not to sign it, because it would be legally enforceable. The fact of the matter is that obviously we need some sort of legal agreement that requires both Mr. Cross to step aside as city treasurer for a period of time while he's co-interim city administrator, and also for that him to resume those duties as city treasurer once a city administrator is hired and begins work. Hence the reason I wanted it in the sections of the ordinance, so that it is enforceable. It may be the very reason why some don't want it in the sections, but I'll leave that to speculation of others.
So, Mr. Mayor, I get to respond.
Just one second, if I could. Point of information, City Attorney Young, is it any more enforceable being the subject of this amendment that's been approved? Is it any more enforceable being in a section versus being in the recital?
As to the reasons I had suggested it be in the recitals, no, it is not.
So it's a wash. There is no, it's not accurate.
Then you should have no problem signing it.
Okay.
Councilmember Taylor.
So since I was in...
Well, actually, we will take that. So we'll speak to the problem of signing it. I think you spoke earlier relative to an issue with the code of having it placed in the body of the ordinance as opposed to without having the intent language. Do you want to speak further to that?
As I mentioned previously, and it was provided information to the council, there is a procedure for reappointment set forth in the charter, and the language that's provided does not match that procedure. So it is inconsistent with the charter.
Wonderful.
And for that reason, I had suggested a declaration of intent, and that certainly is something the council can do. But to the extent that there's an argument to be made that this is some legally enforceable agreement, I do not agree with that.
Thank you. Now, Councilmember Taylor, thank you for your patience.
Yes, just since I was addressed, I'd like to just say, Mr. Werther, I do understand what your intent was in putting it in the body of the language. And as I said all along, I will vote for whatever is legal and right and appropriate. And you know, I probably will vote for this. That said, here's the thing. When the mayor said he would reappoint Mr. Cross, I trust his word. When he says he's going to veto this, I trust his word. In that much I do. So I think we spend a lot of time doing nothing because we cannot trust each other one iota. And I think this is emblematic. This is emblematic of what is the problem with the city. We need to be able to trust each other a bit. Okay? And I think we're going to get a veto. And, you know, I'll vote for it as long as it's not illegal. I'm really stuck on this thing of trying to do what is right in the code. And, you know, but, Mr. Werther, I understand what your intent was. My intent was to get this man appointed and then reappointed.
You and I share the same intent.
Right, we have different ways of getting there. I'm just saying, you know what, I'm just saying this. I think there was a promise made, and if we can't trust each other that much, I think there is, it's just, I have a feeling that this does not bode well. We've spent a lot of time trying to get to the same spot. If we, I mean, the mayor said to Mr. Cross he'd reappoint him. And we don't believe that, so now we're going to finish our exercise in futility. I find this very disappointing. I will vote for it, but I find it very disappointing.
So just point of information, it would not be a veto. It would just not be a consent to the appointment.
Not be a consent to the appointment. So in essence, I trust that you will not authorize this, right?
Okay. Councilor Garetano, I had, you want to speak or you? No. Okay. Roll call vote, please. And this is, I'm sorry, Councilmember Stevens, my apology.
Well, I just had a problem with the way the amendments were handled on this. So if we were debating numbers and we had 1 million amended to 1.5, amended to 1.7, we would not have to go back and vote on the original $1 million amendment, would we? Like, why did we have to go back and this was intentionally confusing, I think.
That's a great question. City Attorney Young?
The Robert's Rules of Order simply provides that if you make an amendment to an amendment, you're amending that amendment. So you still have to go back to the original motion that was made as amended.
They get stacked. You have to go back.
It's the way it's done. Now, you could have done, because of the way these were presented, you could have done them independently and voted on them independently, but it's not how it was done.
I didn't like it any more than you did, but it's the rule. So, okay, Councilor Shea.
Okay, so what I heard,
Councilor Shea has the floor. Go ahead.
what I heard is that it makes no difference where it's at, if it's in the whereas or in the ordinance. It has no more or less legal authority either way, right? Isn't that what you said, Mr. Young?
That's not exactly what I said.
Okay,
but
tell me exactly what you said.
What I'm saying is that putting it in the language and the way it's presented does not purport to do what it purports to do. It's not doing what it purports to do.
So it's not legally binding?
It is not.
Okay, so it's not legally binding the way it's in there, and it would not be legally binding if it were in the whereas, correct? I believe I heard you confirm that for Mr. Werther.
One is less misleading than the other.
Okay, so, but we have the mayor implying that he likes one over the other, but by definition,
okay.
They're equally wrong.
Because there was another issue, and it has to do with the fact that putting it in the recital doesn't have a charter violation presented, and putting it in the section does. I believe the city attorney stated that. Is that correct?
I'm not saying that it has a charter violation per se. I'm just saying that it's not consistent with the procedures and therefore
okay,
misleading.
but materially, what we've got is, sort of a positioning game going on where we're going to say, I have a reason to not give consent, but the reason doesn't hold any more water than if it were in the other portion of it. And to Mr. Taylor's indictment of all of us being not trustworthy enough, I think it's disingenuous to say that, well, the dysfunction starts with people that don't trust the things that they hear or the things that they say are told, and I don't think that that's fair. I mean, I think that, you might be new here, Steve. You may not have quite the same experience, and that doesn't make you in a position to render a judgment against those who've had different experiences and have maybe been here a little bit longer and seen things from a little bit different angle. You can trust it if you want, but that is not sufficient enough reason to disregard the level of distrust that didn't start with council members. We actually came together in a committee and had, I think, Katie, you were the only one that didn't support this coming to a special meeting for reasons of just the timing, right? But we had unanimous consent on all of that. We often have unanimous consent on many things at committee. There's a tremendous amount of trust amongst council people. And by the way, the last time I checked, council runs most of the business of the city. So the real trust factor is firmly intact where it needs to be. The deficiency is, coming from a different source. And it's really painful to hear this compartmentalized, oversimplified interpretation of what constitutes something trustworthy or not. I did not, I will repeat, I did not hear the mayor confirm that he would reappoint him. I heard, barring some malfeasance, I will consider it. That is not the same thing as saying, I will reappoint him. And that is a trust issue.
Those weren't my words, but Councilmember Taylor.
Well, as a rejoinder, you know, I am new, and I did not state that people are untrustworthy. I stated the opposite. I trust my colleagues when they say, this is what I'm thinking, that you're operating in good faith. All right? What I said is, and maybe I am a bit being new, credulous, but I just felt, given the inquiries of the mayor, I did hear something different. I heard, barring malfeasance, barring death, I will re-nominate.
You said consider.
Well,
Councilmember Shea, Councilmember Taylor has the floor.
I'm not going to have it rewritten.
Well,
Councilmember Shea, please.
well,
He didn't interrupt you, don't interrupt him.
well, that's maybe I am more credulous than I should be, but I feel that at least in offering some trust to our chief executive in this situation would have afforded us an opportunity to move to a conclusion that was acceptable to the nominee, and I believe would have resolved this issue. We're at a point where we're going to approve, and I will vote for this, but I believe we can take the mayor at his word that it is going no further. So I am new to this council, but I'm not new to the world, and I understand that politics is the art of the possible. Politics is the art of the possible, and I feel that we had a possible path towards resolution. I think that's narrowed. I mean, it's going to be up to the mayor whether he approves this or not. I will vote in the affirmative. But he's made very clear his intentions, and I believe he has a right to make it known, and he has the right, you know, he's been very straightforward. But I just finishing this, you know, I meant no disrespect to my colleagues if I stated that, if they believed that I stated that they were untrustworthy. I trust my colleagues. And I was also trusting the mayor to renominate.
Councilmember Grignani.
Yeah, I don't want to have to do this again. Point of order, what is the actual motion on the floor now?
So this is, the actual motion is to approve Bill 2430 as amended by Councilmember Werther's.
Okay, so we're approving the bill with the amendment, is
Hold on,
that correct?
Just a second, John, just a second. What?
You need to add the effective date of the appointment. That was in the original language.
Okay, why don't you explain that to him?
One thing that still has to be done is an amendment to Section 3 to include the day, month, year, once confirmed, of the effective date of the appointment. This was in what was presented by the committee, so I don't know what the committee's intentions were there.
All right, now repeat this. Section 3 says it's going to say what?
Section 3, beginning of the second line, there's a bracketed enter day, month, year, once confirmed, of the effective date of the appointment. That was in the resolution that was prepared.
Right.
and
We need to include it,
So we
the
need to
council needs to
amend
include a date in it. When do you want the appointment?
Oh, okay, so
effective?
you want us to give does that have to be given as an amendment?
Yes, sir.
No, I guess we need to have a consensus on it. I would say that we should start this as soon as, immediately. I want tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Okay, so we have a motion to include the effective date as tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., seconded by Councilmember Manson. Is there any objection to that motion? Seeing no objection, that the bill will stand amended as indicated, as well as by Councilmember Werther's motion. Okay? Sure, Councilmember, I'm sorry. Ms. Foster, would you please read the amendment again?
To amend Section 3 to include the effective date as January 4th, 2019 at 8 a.m.
Bingo.
And do you want Councilor Werther's, and Councilor Werther's amendment? Sure. Well, let's let her do that first, Steve. Let her read it. Go ahead.
To include in the sections of the bill that Stephen Cross will temporarily resign as treasurer, and the treasurer position will remain vacant while Stephen Cross is serving as co-interim city administrator, and Stephen Cross will return as city treasurer when the city administrator is hired and begins employment with the city, and Reuben Brown shall perform periodic reviews.
Okay, any other questions, Larry? All right. Mr. Cross?
I just wanted to go back to what I had said earlier, that as the person who is the subject of all of this, and I don't even know where the heck we are at this point, I agreed to relinquish my role as treasurer, perform the duties of the co-interim city administrator to the best of my ability, in the hopes that at the end of that time that I would be able to resume my duties as treasurer. I was asked if I took you at your word and trusted you, and I answered in the affirmative with no hesitation. Okay? So my concern at this point is, and I don't, like I say, you guys know way more about all of this than I do, but, you know, so I've given all the way and said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. When I was first received a call the day that Ryan resigned and I was asked would I serve, I said, yes, I'll serve. I'll do whatever the city needs me to do as long as there's no conflict of interest or anything else. That is a verbatim quote of what I had said to Councilman Werther. I worry. I don't know. Again, you guys know way more about parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules of Order, et cetera, but what I don't want to have happen, I want you all to understand where I'm coming from so that you go through all of this and then all of a sudden somebody votes and I don't get to serve as co-interim, you know. I don't want it to come to that. I've given as much as I can give and given you all assurances that I'm okay with what you're doing, but I sure hope this thing just doesn't get killed in all this noise to where I don't get the appointment. That'd be a tragedy, in my opinion. So I hope that, so I don't know who can veto this or if you're consent or not consent, but like I say, this is way beyond me and I don't even want to get involved in this crap. That's why I served as treasurer. I got to stay in the background and do my stuff and didn't have to do this. So I want you to know that I will do whatever you all need and I will trust that at the end of that time, but I don't want it to get, and believe me, I appreciate more than I could possibly say for the folks of you up there that are supporting me and trying to get this through, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. But at the end of the day, if that causes the appointment to not occur, then that would be a worse outcome, in my opinion. Okay? I just wanted to state that.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Grignani.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that what we're about to do here is 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, you and Mr. Vunich will be co-city administrators. If we can get this vote done, do I need to make a motion for...
If you can get the vote done and the mayor signs it.
Well, let's just do it.
Okay. So the motion is to pass Bill 2430 as amended with the effective date being tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and as amended by Councilmember Werther's motion that has been read, I think, 3 times. Do you want it? Okay. All right. Councilmember Garetano.
Yeah, I do have a question. I understand a lot about certain concerns around the code and going against the charter with the placement of the language, but and maybe this is for for the city attorney. What happens?
Councilmember Shea, please.
In a hypothetical situation, let's say if this does not pass, can we put in another motion to maybe adjust it or and try to get this moving forward to the point that the city treasurer said, we'd like to get this, passed. I'm on that too here.
Yeah, if the bill fails, there is the opportunity, if there is a majority on the failing side, to reconsider it and make amendments to it after reconsideration.
Okay. All right,
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Garetano?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Stevens.
At what point does the mayor offer his consent or non-consent? If it's 8 a.m. tomorrow, I guess he has to decide before 8 a.m., right? So.
The mayor can provide his consent or not provide his consent at the mayor's discretion. There's no time frame set forth. So if it's not done by 8 a.m., the appointment is not effective.
Councilmember Dillard?
Part of, well, I don't, this, I guess a point of order. Did you say it's not effective if he doesn't do it by 8 a.m.?
No, I'm saying it's not effective until he does it, but if 8 a.m. comes tomorrow and he hasn't signed it, it's not effective yet. If he signs it after that, it becomes effective.
Would it be retroactively effective?
There is a provision later on in the language that says it becomes effective when the mayor signs it, so that would supersede the 8 a.m. So it would become effective on the time that the mayor signs it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? All right, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Shea?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yep.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Based on the existing code in our charter, no.
Councilmember Bope?
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Garitano?
No.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Gragnani?
Yes.
Councilmember McGowan?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Because the city attorney told us that this is not a charter violation, yes.
Councilmember Manton?
Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is adjournment. Would entertain a motion to adjourn, made by Councilmember Manton. Okay.
Quick comment. Thank you very much, Mr. Cross, for your patience and time tonight. And also, I'd like to thank Mr. Boonish, who graciously volunteered.
Council members, we don't have a miscellaneous section on the agenda. Special meetings have to be done in accordance with what we have in our code that's set forth, so I'm sorry. Katie?
As the chair of the committee, what are our next steps to be now? Since
that's
our
something,
our existing appointments did not pass?
So let's get the meeting adjourned and then we can, I think that's something to be appropriate after the meeting, since we don't have, it's not on the agenda. Sorry. Okay. Did we have a motion to adjourn? Did we have someone make the motion to adjourn, Madam Clerk? Okay. Does someone want to make it? Councilmember McGowan, seconded by Councilmember Bartoni, non-debatable. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Stand adjourned. Thank you.
Mr. Vick, congratulations. We'll see how long it lasts.